The more I get to know people, the more I love animals, Eva caught herself thinking. After her experience with real wolves, the old woman has lived in a small village all her life. The village was surrounded by endless fields and dense forest. This area was known for its well-developed agriculture, so almost all the local residents worked either on farms or plantations for growing vegetables and berries. The woman's husband, Frederick, passed away a long time ago. He had a stroke at a very young age. The only light in the old woman's life was her son Alan. The man didn't want to leave his mother alone. Thus, he chose to come back to the village after graduating from college in a big city. Back home, he got a job as a forester and continued in his father's footsteps. From early childhood, his dad instilled in young Alan a love of nature and a sense of responsibility for its inhabitants. There was always perfect order on Alan's territory. Even the population of wolves never exceeded the norm. After all, predators lived very close to farms with cows and sheep. The forester knew perfectly well that nature needed balance. Then it would be easier for both people and animals to coexist peacefully. Life in the region went on as usual until the appointment of the new chairman of the village community, Jerome Cruz. Together with his son-in-law, Louis, the unscrupulous businessman started exterminating wild animals. The scoundrels neglected all the principles of morality and even the law, arranging shooting ranges in the forest. And every attempt to stop them ended in failure. It was rumored that the men had extensive connections with local criminal gangs, and that even the police didn't want to get involved with them. Alan couldn't tolerate the illegal and immoral behavior of Louis and his gang, who were always covered for by Louis's father-in-law. Alan often turned to various authorities with complaints that innocent animals were being killed, but his actions only angered the chairman and his buddies. Unfortunately, this conflict ended with the fact that Alan's lifeless body was found in the middle of the forest. The forester died of blood loss caused by a bullet wound to his stomach. Poor Eva was completely devastated and couldn't even come to terms with her son's death for a long time. The old woman was left alone with her pain, and she couldn't even get justice for Alan's death, as it was impossible to find his murderer, even though everyone knew who was responsible for it. A year later, the old woman woke up in the middle of the night to the barking of the yard dog. The dog was so loud that it could wake up the whole neighborhood. Taking a flashlight, the woman hurried outside to see what was happening. The dog broke free from the chain and bared its teeth, glancing nervously in the direction of the half-open barn door. "My God, what brought you here in the middle of the night?" the woman exclaimed when she saw a young she-wolf on the floor of the barn. Apparently, the poor animal had no choice but to seek help from a human. "Are they shooting out there again? How much blood do they need to spill? Bastards! Isn't there anyone who can stop them?" Meanwhile, the she-wolf didn't show any signs of aggression or fear. She lay on her side and breathed heavily. And when the old woman came closer, she saw that the predator was pregnant. "So, you're expecting offspring, my dear." Eva was touched and petted the animal on the head. The she-wolf began to lick the woman's hand. "Don't worry, you're completely safe here. I will protect you and your kids, even though I couldn't protect my own son. You know, I never got grandkids from him. He had some girlfriends, but apparently no one was in a hurry to start a family with a forester. Alan was stubborn and hardworking. He disappeared in the forest for days on end, worrying about the animals, trying to save them from death, and he became the victim of poachers himself." The woman wiped away her tears and hurried to the house to get some milk for her guest. The next morning, Eva went to buy some fresh meat for the she-wolf. Stepping inside the store, she heard some local men discussing the pressing problems of the village. One of the men was the infamous son-in-law of the chairman, Louis. The wealthy farmer was telling proudly how he and his brothers hunt predators in the forest every week, showing pictures of their trophies. "Soon we'll have exterminated all the wolves. Then our farms will no longer be in danger, and our cattle will finally stop disappearing." And the men all laughed out loud together. The old woman just quietly shook her head. She knew that those men only had their own interests at heart. The young forester, Brian, spoke up in defense of the wolves. "Why spill the blood of innocent animals? Everyone knows that wolves will never steal livestock just for the sake of it. They only do it because their wild prey moved further into the forest, scared by all the illegal felling that you're doing there. So actually, it's all your fault." The accusations of the young forester made Lewis blush. The angry businessman came very close to Brian and, clenching his fists, said, "Don't be smart with me. Just go sit quietly in your forest hut. Do you think it's easy for me to suffer daily losses from all the sheep being stolen by wolves? Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong, or you might be joining your friend." The old woman understood what was at stake and tried to take the young forester away from the drunken company. "Brian? Son? Please help the old woman carry the heavy bags home," Eva intervened. The man was happy to help and accompanied the old lady to her house. Since Brian knew Alan well, they had something to talk about on their way. He worked together with the woman's deceased son. Although they were responsible for different territories, the old woman told the forester about her suspicions as to who might be responsible for the murder of her son, and asked the young man to be careful. Back home, wolf pups were already waiting for the woman in the barn. The young she-wolf gave birth to 4 healthy pups. At the sight of the little gray fluff balls, tears welled up in the old woman's eyes. Now Eva was in for some new but pleasant responsibilities. Good care and good nutrition helped the she-wolf quickly recover from childbirth. Now she could go out into the yard, and sometimes into the forest. But she always left her pups in the barn. Apparently, she could sense the danger. Unfortunately, the situation in the village escalated even more. Dozens of hunters combed the forest every day, ruthlessly exterminating predators on the orders of Chairman Jerome. One day, Eva brought food to the wolf pups and some fresh broth for their mother, as she always did. However, opening the barn door, she was literally dumbfounded. At least 7 adult wolves were looking at the woman. The animals behaved calmly. They were most likely brought to the barn by the young she-wolf to protect them from bloodthirsty poachers. "This is just cruel." The woman held her head in her hands. "They can't just exterminate animals so ruthlessly." Poor Eva didn't know who she could turn to for help, because a whole pack of wolves with their pups was now hiding in her house. But the help came from where it was least expected. The young forester Brian was a very efficient and attentive employee. One late evening, he saw a pack of wolves running into the yard of the old woman. The forester realized that the woman was helping the wolves out of the kindness of her heart, and that the heavy bags of fresh meat he helped her carry were food for the animals. The man didn't want anyone to find out about her secret, so he decided that it was time to put an end to the criminal affairs of the chairman and his son-in-law. Brian came up with a plan. He knew that the wolves were accused of stealing livestock, and this pretext was used for the illegal shootings. Thus, he needed to prove the innocence of the predators. Late in the evening, the forester set up noose traps on the path leading from the farm to the forest. Thus, no one would be able to leave the farm unnoticed. Brian filled the district police officer in on his plan, and together they took up surveillance. The men hid and started waiting, but nothing happened for the longest time. However, a little after midnight, they heard a loud scream. When the men hurried to the path with the traps, they couldn't believe their eyes. The wealthy farmer Lewis had his foot caught in the noose. Moreover, the man had 2 young lambs with him. "Now that's an unexpected turn of events," the district policeman said. "So he's been coming up with the lies about losing livestock, blaming the wolves for it. And all this time, it was Lewis who's been setting up the animals in order to make people angry with the innocent predators." When the truth was revealed, the villagers rebelled against the illegal deals of the authorities. The chairman and his son-in-law were taken into custody. During a search of Lewis's house, they found an engraved gun that belonged to the murdered forester, Alan. The police quickly figured it all out. Apparently, the farmer and his gang of criminals were illegally mining amber by the river, and Chairman Jerome covered for them. The police discovered the quarry with rich deposits of valuable stone. However, their plan was endangered by a pack of wolves, and the forester knew about the quarry. Poor Alan was shot dead, and when the village calmed down about the incident, the gang decided to exterminate the wolves, under the pretext that the predators were stealing cattle. Now the criminals were facing criminal charges and impressive prison sentences. The wolf pack could now safely return to the forest. The young wolf and her cubs have become very attached to Eva during the time they spent together. They could never abandon the old woman completely and came back to visit her every now and then. The more I get to know people, the more I love animals, Eva caught herself thinking after her experience with real wolves.